Welcome back. All right, now we go into our second topic, where is scheduling technique. Where is scheduling technique? Yeah, we are going to introduce you to the concept of a few scheduling technique around. We are not going to tell all, okay, because in our class, this is what we are going to zoom in particular. That's it, because if you want to learn all, then we could not even finish the class. The importance of construction scheduling. We already mentioned many in our introduction. For sure here will be additional one to give confidence to the client. So that's why during tender, you are being asked to basically to submit the CPM diagram in order for the client to look at whether you understand or not. What are the things that you are going to be constructed? If you miss out some of the thing, meaning to say your scheduling is not realistic, then people have the impression whether you as a contractor, whether you really know or not how to execute the work. That is the first impression. To eliminate any uncertainties, of course, planning, we plan thing which is not there yet. Planning is always involve the future. Okay, why do we do that? In order to avoid what we call any untoward incident, so that we can prepare. And normally when we come up with a plan, we do have plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, E, F, whatever. If something not working, for instance, plan A, what is our backup plan? And that is what planning is all about. Okay. And then to improve the efficiency of the operation through efficient use of resources and control, I already mentioned when we do planning and scheduling on the initial stage, we are going to list out all the activity and coming out with the timing for each of the activity, and then we are going to attach resources. Then only later on, we are going to generate the graph utilization of man and even machine. We do not do that for material because material are quite complicated unless you do project which basically require almost the same material. Example, let's say you do revetment or growing or macam projek pemecah ombak kan, di tepi-tepi pantai tu, dia punya material tu sama je lah, batu kecil besar. Okay, yang tu mungkin boleh lah. Tapi kalau yang building, oh my god, it involves thousand material. How exactly are you going to ni? Susah juga. To better understand the project objective, and then at the end of the day, basis for monitoring. We already covered those things. And the most important scheduling is basically for the contractor. And contractor is the one that know well about scheduling, not anybody else. Not even the client, not even the consultant. Consultant, basically, most of the time, they are doing the design work. They are not at the construction site. They do not really know about the construction technique in detail. They have some ideas. So the contractor is the one that basically know very well about planning and scheduling. Okay. So contractor will basically need to come up with the what we call comprehensive scheduling. Do not left out many important things, and then realistic scheduling, so that later on he know when to bring in the equipment, people, material, etc. And it can be form of the monitoring tool or tracking and controlling later on. And then, as I mentioned, to support claim and request for EOT. EOT, when you want to claim, you just simply cannot say, oh, okay, we experience 2 weeks delay. Okay, give it some extra time. No. You have to, there are many processes. First thing first, for instance, when you encounter you encounter delay, you need to notify the client that you're experiencing the delay. That's what we call delay notification. So that is the contract. Sometimes client or the client representative, they like to play fool with you. Okay, for instance, hey, you didn't give us notification of delay, whereas they already know the delay themselves, but they follow the black and white what it is written there. You see, so you must really know your contract. That's what I mentioned in the earlier slide. And client, the client, the only thing that client interested is basically the progress. Okay, so client need to monitor your progress. What could be the indicator? One of the indicator could be S curve, for instance. There could be many other things, but that could be one of the easiest indicator that we in the construction industry always refer to. Okay, so client need information. All right. Example, when you look at this thing, this is what we call bar chart. Okay, bar chart. Simple bar chart consists of activity, namely G, H, I, J, K, whatever the name. In reality, you need to put real names, but in most of our class example, we are going to use A, B, C, D, so that it is much faster that way. And then duration. Duration, 1 week or 2 weeks or days or whatever thing unit that you use, as I mentioned, have to be calculated using the concept of productivity rate. In the next slide later on, we are going to mention about those things. And then people, let's say you want to attach or to show people. Activity G require 5%, okay? So the bar chart will be drawn like this, indicate the beginning and then ending for 1 week, for instance, and we'll be utilizing 5. And then follow some of the activity. And the most important thing is when you attach resources, then you are going to see this what we call resource graph. We can draw this thing manually, but later on, we are going to learn to draw this thing manually, but later on, when I show you in Microsoft project, you are going to see that this graph will be automatically generated by the software, because once you input this figure. If you do not input this one, of course, you are not going to see the resource graph. What is the purpose of resource graph? Well, simply, you wanted to know how many number of people is going to be working on the first week, second week, subsequently, and etc., so that you can be prepared. As I mentioned, you do not want to bring people too early or too late. Too early meaning to say you have to pay people for simply doing nothing. Too late meaning to say you cannot execute your work in according to your plan because you don't get the manpower as required, and you do not want to bring a few number of people and too many people, because everything basically relate to cost or money. And in this situation, it looks, this graph, the very nice graph, this is what we call very smooth graph, very smooth graph. But later on, when we are going to learn, when you develop your scheduling, the first round, okay, first version, the graph might not look like this. Graph might look worse in such a way, they might be peak and basically trough ataupun puncak dan lembah. This kind of situation will make your life difficult, especially trying to find more people, and then how are you going to keep people who are not needed? Are you going to pay them? That is what we call resource management. And you know what? In order to come up with this thing, you can do something with the arrangement of the activity. Because on the first place, who did this scheduling? We are the one that did the scheduling. If we are the one that did the scheduling, we are the one that can modify. The most important thing, we do not encroach into what we call contract period, 2 years. Whatever thing that we do is basically within the contract period. Contract period 2 years, normally you can complete the project actually maybe within 1.5 years actually, but then basically you spread things around in order to fit the time frame of 2 years, because you allow for some kind of what we call extra time, you never know, that is kind of things. So example, first thing, basically for resources. Yeah, this is example of resources. Then second is for the cost. Let's say for each activity, we can come up with the cost. Where do we get, where can we get the cost for each activity? Well, this is the process of estimating. You estimate how many manpower, how many machine, how many material, how much material you are going to use. This normally relate to what we call direct costs. So you end up with that thing. So each activity, for sure, it requires cost. Maybe the activity which basically doesn't require cost is just like small activity like concrete curing. And in fact, we do not put concrete curing as activity. Normally, no. We do have another mechanism to reflect those things. Normally, when you put into activity, list activity is a big thing that basically require man, machine, and material. Eventually, you know the cost to execute one particular activity. And once you know the cost, and you know what? You can come up with what we call financial S-curve. Financial S-curve that might look like this. The red one, it doesn't matter. This is what we call the plan. It could be financial S-curve, it could be physical, it doesn't matter. Okay, let's say that is your financial S-curve. How do you get those things? It's from the list of the cost, and then you are going to distribute according to, you are going to distribute something like this. Okay, you distribute the amount of money, etc., and you will end up with the graph. Later on, we are going to learn how basically we develop this graph. So there are two S-curve that normally being used in the construction, for instance, physical progress, S-curve, and then financial. Okay, so both of the progress curve do have what we call plan. Plan is something original. We plan from at the beginning of the project, and then the dotted line is the one we call it actual. You see, for this project, for the first 3 weeks, it looks like the progress is quite slow. The progress is quite slow. And this, how do you plot this graph? Is through the process of tracking or monitoring. Remember, I mentioned to you, tracking and monitoring is the process of getting the information. Once you get information, you can put it into graph or whatever things so that you understand. But the most important thing, the second step is taking action. Taking action is basically control. You do not want your project to basically slip further and further and further. You need to catch up. So what happens is that, you see, the graph is positive. This one, you need to basically bring back the progress according to what you plan. So you need to catch up. So never mind, there could be some sluggish in between, but then you catch up faster than the plan, etc. The most important thing, you end up with the same kind of point. And this is what we call practical completion. That should be the idea behind the original plan and the what we call, you plot the actual one, and then if it is not in according to the original plan, you need to catch up. Okay. Sometimes what happens is that people just simply revise the plan because they know that it is impossible. Well, that is basically, it is not to say that it is wrong. So that's why the original plan must be constructed accurately. Otherwise, you are going to revise your plan. So actually, you should revise your action plan, not the original plan. It is the strategy that you do. You have to work extra. You have to bring more manpower. You have to cancel whatever weekend that you have because you are the one that planned there is a weekend or whatever, because now you are running short of time. So you need to do something drastic action. Okay. important aspect that need to be scheduled. What basically you schedule? Activity start and then finish time. Okay, when do activity start and then when basically activity finish. So that is what we call duration of activity. Distribution of project cost. Okay, you know that project might cost 10 million. All right, that would be fine. That is the total sum. But how do you distribute into each activity? That would be one thing. But then you want to know among all the activities that fall within the time frame of first month, for instance, you wanted to know how much money that basically you need to spend on the first month. And that basically will reflect your monthly cash flow. Sometimes people ask, why do we basically distribute the cost according to activity and then monthly? What for? Well, this is what we call accounting system. So every month, you basically keep track of your account. You do not want to be running short of cash in that particular month. And at the end of the day, you get protests from workers, from your subcontractor, supplier, because you thought that everything is okay. Actually, everything can be predetermined once you have your scheduling in place. That's how we are going to relate later on. Allocation of resources, I already mentioned in this previous slide there. Okay, now talking about master plan and detailed plan. Master plan normally is the plan that you see consists of big or major activity. Let's say in a piece of land there that you develop, maybe consists of shop houses, maybe consists of terrace houses, maybe consists of tall building, maybe consists of mosque, for instance, maybe consists of school, etc., full of development. So in master plan, what you can do is that in a big piece of poster or paper, you just simply mention, okay, school, as piece of bar chart there. And then what we call moss. That's it. And then house, example. And then everything is there. This is what we call master plan. And it depends on who is going to read. Normally the boss, big boss, whatever, they don't care about the detailing. They would just wanted to know the overall and the most important thing for them when the project is going to be completed. Okay. So
Master plan is something like a high level plan, is it?
yeah, it is something like consists of major item only. You do not show the detail. Okay. The good thing is that once we use the software, the good thing is that you normally input major item plus the detail. Okay, the detail meaning to say, let's say you want to show school. Well, school involve a lot of things in the construction. Start with piling, substructure work, superstructure work, mechanical, electrical, etc., etc. So those kind of detailing, what I mean. Okay, so you can basically hide when you want to print. You basically hide the detailing because certain quarters of people might not need the detailing. Detailing is only for you and your team to work on. Okay, now detail work. Well, in whatever program, you must have the detail work. Why? You wanted to give the detail work to many people. Your subcon, even your supplier also wanted to know when they can come in. For instance, if you give them a piece of your bar chart in detail, okay, they know, okay, this is the timing, tentative timing. Even your workers need to know. But when you are dealing with workers, you have to be very careful. Okay, you do not want to give the worker the detailed scheduling for your entire project for 2 years. They are not interested. Workers always have the same mentality as workers. They come during that day, they only wanted to know what shall they do during that day. That's it. Don't tell them tomorrow. They might not remember. That is the workers' mentality. What to do, that is the concept, okay? We are the one that have to split them. Let's say the master plan is basically the thing that you put in 2 years that consists of detailed activity, that major activity within the time frame of 2 years. But then detailed work, you must split into month or even week or even daily basis so that people can see. But if, for instance, you wanted to hand the schedule to the workers, it is better to divide them into daily work so that they can absorb, okay? If you give them too much, then that's it, they are not interested. Okay. Method of developing project schedule. Manual scheduling. Of course, before the invention of whatever software, we all learn about manual scheduling, okay? So that's why in our class, we are going to use, to learn about manual scheduling first and look at the concept, and we even can calculate manually. And then later on, we are going to use tools such as Microsoft Project to help us, okay? Because the issue is that in real work, the activity might not be little anymore. Nowadays, we have seen 100, even 1,000 of activity, even for a small project, okay? So the issue is, as I mentioned before, it is not to develop the schedule that matter the most. It is the issue with updating or tracking. That is the most difficult things, okay? And oftentimes people abandon using whatever computer, whatever, because it is too much. They cannot keep track because they do not understand the whole thing. Maybe they come in the middle of the project, or they want to trace back, which basically it is very difficult. Okay. And you know what? Talking about scheduling software, I did some Google, for instance, a few months or even last year, I guess, over 200 scheduling software in the market. This is just an example that I pick up: Artemis, Fast Track Schedule, Pro, Workflow, Milestone, and then I list Microsoft Project and Primavera. And you know what? Even top 10, if you Google top 10 scheduling software in the market right now, it might be different from my slide, okay? Because things keep changing. And some of the software we don't even hear it is being used in Malaysia. Microsoft Project, okay. Primavera, okay. But even Primavera also not being listed in this top 10. Why? It depends on how many number of users. And most of these software are being developed in US, for instance. Primavera, Microsoft Project are being developed there. And you have to imagine, US do have population around 330 million. It's 10 times than Malaysia. If they do develop one software, and then they basically sell within the country, that will be, they basically make money. It is break even already, not to mention if they sell outside of the country, okay? And that's why sometimes when we want to use this software, we found it kind of difficult because the software basically is not tailor-made to what our work environment or work system. In US, they do heavily on unit rate, not unit rate, hourly rate. Everybody have hourly rate. Workers have hourly rate. Equipment have hourly rate. Even professional also do have hourly rate. We basically do not use that concept. Okay, a lot. Huh? If you are working with McDonald's and KFC, yes, because they use the same system anyway. So the most important thing, this is some of the what we call again the software. The most important thing, when you want to even learn and be professional in project scheduling, what kind of software that you have to use? Okay, now you have to understand who is going to read your the output or the printout that you basically share. Basically, we call it reader. Who is going to be your reader? Okay. If, for instance, you are working with consultant doing design work or architecture, consultant normally do have a few software that they work with. They sometimes they even develop their own Excel database just for the sake of computation of the design load. They just wanted that thing only. And who is going to read their design anyway? Yeah, sometimes client do ask about the design. Even client also do not know how to interpret the design, and not to mention contractor. Contractor got nothing to do with the what we call consultant design, because contractor in open tender, they just basically bid based on drawing, based on whatever information given. No question asked on the design, unless they are into design and build. That would be a different story. Okay. So very minimum reader. But when we are talking about project scheduling, as a contractor, for sure, you are the one that developed this thing. And then how about your client? How about consultant? Yeah, consultant is the one that look after you, after your work. And then subcon. So many subcon. And then supplier. And etc. etc. Even client also sometimes can be divided into, like government project. JKR is the implementation agency, but then there is another ministry which basically act as the end user, because if you're a building hospital, it belongs to Ministry of what we call health. If you're a building school, you see there are even different category of user and then implementing agency. So when you give them what we call soft copy, they simply cannot open. So everybody must basically have the same or common software that they can understand, they can learn, etc., etc. And in Malaysia, I would say it is more than sufficient if you learn just these two things: Microsoft Project and Primavera. Okay, what could be the differences between these two software? Primavera was invented, I think, I'm not really sure, because I have learned Primavera a long time ago during my study in university, and at that time, I don't even remember the existence of Microsoft Windows yet. So meaning to say, Primavera might basically appear much earlier. At that time, we used DOS version of Primavera. Okay, and you know what? A lot of function found in Primavera are now in Microsoft Project. So meaning to say, they basically copy paste all the function slowly. But in terms of features, Primavera do have a lot more features. And no wonder why in terms of pricing, Primavera will always cost you 10 times more. 10 times more. For instance, Microsoft Project Professional, they are selling for 2,400, 500. So Primavera could be costing you around 24,000. That is the, I don't know, commercial version, but we can get at 5 ringgit or 7 ringgit. That will be better. Never mind, just for the sake of learning. Okay, so you can imagine why it is more expensive, because of the features. Okay, many more features. So in that case, quite difficult to develop anyway. But at least if you learn about Microsoft Project, that will be good enough. I tell you, okay, more than sufficient. So Primavera was invented for the purpose of complex project, which basically suited in oil and gas and even construction, because construction can be defined as a complex project. Whereas Microsoft Project is being invented for multi-discipline. Multi-discipline meaning to say all kind of discipline, even the wedding planner, as mentioned to you. Other people also do use Microsoft Project in other fields, not necessarily be construction. But both of this software is being owned by the richest people in the world. For instance, Microsoft Project, Bill Gates, and then Primavera now is being owned by Oracle. It was used to be owned by Primavera Incorporated, but then it was bought over by Oracle. Larry, what is the name of that guy? Larry, he is also one the top richest man in the world, and he basically owned many software, Java, you just name it. And in construction, the communication software, I don't remember the name, which is widely used worldwide, also owned by this guy anyway. All right, okay. Why we use software? Because of this issue, updating. And in our class, in some of our what we call assignment or even final exam, we just simply give you activity up to 20 activities. But even with that 20 activity, it will take you forever. Not to say forever. We basically design so that that question can be solved within half an hour. Okay, for instance. But if you get stuck, then you will take forever. See, we just simply give 20 activities, not to mention 1,000. If 1,000, it will take a few years to complete. Okay, so the best solution is basically use the computer, and then computer can basically be updated very easily. And the most important thing, once you update on the, let's say activity D is being delayed, automatically the subsequent activity E and the rest will be shown the impact. And that is the one that we basically want. And that's why we basically use computer software, because it is being developed in a network diagram. Okay, network diagram meaning to say everything is interconnected. Okay, now we come into our few technique, scheduling technique. Okay, Gantt chart and bar chart. Gantt chart basically is being named after Henry Gantt. Do we have his name here? Oh, okay, we do it. Gantt or bar chart. For scheduling, the proper terminology is basically we use Gantt chart. But it is okay to use bar chart because the Gantt being reflected by bar. What is bar? Example. This is the bar. The one you see here is the bar. But the Gantt chart basically being referred to this guy named Henry Lawrence Gantt way back in 1910. I think he was a engineer, a mechanical engineer, I'm not mistaken. He developed this thing to solve some of his work in the factory or something like that. But then this thing was being widely used in all the industry nowadays. Okay, because it is very difficult, very easy to show your work in a simple bar chart or Gantt chart. Meaning to say, you list out the activity by using proper name. Okay, then the activity duration, you can calculate activity duration, and then priority meaning to say the logic between one activity and another. And then you can just simply draw the bar, reflect the starting and then the ending of activity, the period, and etc. So people can understand. Okay, example, again, list of activity name, and then you draw the bar. This is what we call bar or the Gantt chart. Okay, mostly the scheduling, the bar chart will be in horizontal. The bar chart that we normally draw in Excel to show many other things normally reflect the quantity. But when it comes to timing, January, February, this is what we call timing or time scale. Timing or time scale. So the length of the bar reflects the duration of that activity, and this simply just the list of activity. Okay, that would be the first Gantt or bar chart. So bar chart is basically two-dimensional axis, timeline, and then Y reflect the specific name of activities. And then normally we will show the duration of the activity, but then we can put many more things. Later on, we are going to learn how to put in this column duration and then cost and then resources as well. Then you can see the whole things. Okay. All right. Next would be Next technique would be link bar chart or link Gantt chart. Okay, if you take a look at this diagram, we do not link activity, first activity, second activity together. So sometimes it is very hard. In the old days, when people do not use software, people just simply use the spreadsheet or Microsoft, Excel or even AutoCAD or whatever drawing, because it is too difficult to draw the link between one activity and another. So we just simply show something like this. Whereas we need the link. So if you use the current software, automatically the link will be shown. That is a good thing. Okay, that is a good thing between the activity. Okay, now another thing, bar chart, if you notice, there are two bars for each of the activity, actual and then original. This is what we call tracking. T-R-A-C, tracking gun. Tracking gun. The one that I show you, tracking gun is being generated or being printed out from Microsoft project. Later on, when we learn about Microsoft project, once we update the project, give some sample of the project tracking, then you can see this kind of dual bar chart for each activity being shown, just to show what is this thing is being shown here. This one, the bottom one, normally what we call baseline. Baseline is the plan, the original. Whereas the blue in color, the blue reflect what we call actual. So we can see what are the timing that we plan, and in reality what happened. Okay, this is what the tracking gun is all about. Okay. All right. Next would be network diagram. Network diagram is the one that we are going to spend the rest of our time tomorrow. Okay, going through these kind of things, namely arrow activity on arrow, or simply arrow diagram. AOA stand for activity on arrow. AOA. Whereas AON stand for activity on node. Or later on, subsequently, it is better known as a PDM diagram, which is being used in MS Project and Primavera that I mentioned before. So a lot of current software basically use this kind of diagram. AOA diagram, when I start working long time ago, when I graduated, for instance, one of the earliest software being developed called Artemis. See this software, the Artemis one, basically use AOA diagram. And I did some searching. I'm not really sure whether they use the same what we call concept or not. Okay, so different what because software maybe use different technique. Okay, but if basically we use the PDM diagram, that will be more than sufficient. Okay, PERT, P-E-R-T, PERT diagram. PERT diagram is basically being derived by arrow diagram. So arrow diagram was being invented first, then subsequently PERT diagram was there. That basically use the application of arrow diagram in order to reflect something. Okay. Then lastly is line of balance. Okay, now let's go into network diagram. We have some slide there. Where is this? Oh, comparison bar chart, advantages and disadvantages. I would say easy to draw, easy to read. People, you don't have to basically come to the class in order to read. Any people from different level also can understand easily. But the disadvantages because of the link is not there. Okay, between each activity, so you cannot really see the interconnection between activities, and basically maybe difficult to draw if you use if you do not use software. Okay, and difficult to basically in terms of updating later on. Okay, now we go into network diagram. So network diagram show the precedence. Remember the word that I mentioned before, predecessor. Predecessor. So the word predecessor basically come from the concept precedent. Precedent meaning to say the activity that come before. Okay, before before the start of activity, what is that activity? Okay, so instead of expressing the activity in terms of subsequent activity, the concept of what we call this network diagram always basically refer to the previous activity. Okay, because it is the concept of when we start to draw, we basically start drawing from the left side of the paper. That is the issue. It is easy to understand this relationship graphically because everything is basically interconnected. And why it is interconnected? Because we want to know the impact. What happens when one activity is basically being delayed? How it going to affect the start of the following activity? And what would happen to the project duration? That is the issue. Two version of network diagram, activity on arrow, AOA diagram, or sometimes better known as AD, arrow diagram alone, or sometimes better known as ADM, arrow diagramming method. So they are all the same thing anyway. Simple for project with many dependency, emphasize events, milestone, etc. Sometimes require dummy activities. I will explain later on. Later on, we do have slides that basically tell us about AOA diagram, but I just want to introduce the concept first here. So activity on node diagram was being invented after they invented the AOA diagram. And then even AON diagram later on being modified or enhanced version, and subsequently they are being called PDM diagram. Or sometimes we just simply mention PM, precedent method. Okay, so it's quite the same thing. Easier to draw for a simple project, emphasize activity, and there is no dummy. Okay, later on we are going to zoom in into these two important things. Okay, now activities versus event. When we use the word activities, activity mean work to be done. What are the activity that in a project that need to be completed or to be performed? And you know what? In Microsoft project or even Primavera, they do not call the work to be done as activity. They call it tasks. So then don't get confused. Later on, when you open up computer and you're trying to find activity, where is the activity column? No such thing. They simply name it task. Why? As I mentioned to you, the software is not meant for any particular industry. It was meant for everybody to use in all kind of display, and maybe in other display they simply call it task to be performed. Okay, event reflect what we call significant point. Example of event is the start and finish. Normally, when you see the network, we start drawing with what we call start activity. So the start activity doesn't have any what we call important tasks. It is just the start, but that basically reflect the important event. Similarly, with the task name finish. Finish is just to mention that, okay, now we already completed the whole what we call list of activity there. Okay, so in scheduling, we call this one as milestone. That is a proper name for start and finish event. We call it milestone. Milestone means to say important event. Okay, important event. Dummy activity. Dummy activity is an artificial, or we call it fake, F A, cannot write, FAKE, fake. Fake ni maksudnya tiruan lah. It is not the real activity, but then when we draw a network diagram, we need to have we need to show some kind of activity with the concept of a little bit different from the real activity, okay, in order to show the connection. Okay, later on, I will explain in a drawing. That will be much better. Normally, the dummy activity appear in AOA diagram. In AON and PDM diagram, we do not need dummy activity. There is no need because the concept of technique itself is basically self-sufficient. You have everything in order to construct the network diagram in order to let people understand. Oh, okay. When people look at your network diagram, people understand. Oh, okay, this activity connect to that activity, and etc. etc. That is the idea to show in terms of graphic form. Okay, network technique. We do have AOA and then AON diagram. Okay, now let me just quickly go into basic features. In order to draw network diagram, you need to have elements such as arrow, then node, then logical relationship. This is what I call predecessor and successor, and then path, and then critical path. Okay, so what are these things? Okay, let's go into diagram. Okay, let's take a look at AOA diagram in brief. We do have another slide in order to really zoom into this thing. Okay, AOA diagram. AOA diagram, how do you draw? You are going to start drawing with one circle. And this circle we could node. And then you are going to draw arrow. Arrow and with arrowhead. And then you are going to name the activity or write the activity on the arrow. Let's say I mentioned piling. And then you are going to close with another node. And then let's say there is subsequent activity, name sum. So you draw another arrow and with the arrowhead, and you close with one node. And on the left side, the node here, you start your activity. The start is basically on the left side. When you reach the next, what we call node here, that is the finish of activity. And the activity could be running for, let's say, piling for 10 days. So you write down 10 days at the bottom of the arrow there in order to indicate. And the stum, let's say stum lasts for 3 days. So stum will basically start after piling completed, start on the left side. And then on the arrowhead, basically it will finish. So from here, AOA diagram, I already draw 2 activities. And this is how AOA diagram is being drawn. In contrast with AON diagram, activity on node. Remember the circle one, this is what we call node. And then node. So remember, we already mentioned about arrow. Now, number 2 is basically node. But for AON diagram, I already mentioned to you, activity piling, we are going to write on the node. So the node could be the circle one. And the activity, we just put piling inside the big node there. So because there are 2 activity, piling and stum, so there are 2 nodes. One is piling and another one is basically stum. And how about the arrow? The arrow is just simply to show the connection relationship in terms of, okay, piling activity. On the left side of the circle, we reflect start. And then it will go on for 10 days. And then on the right side of the circle, it will basically finish. So that's how things are being drawn there. And then the arrow here, it does not reflect activity. It just reflects relationship. See? And then stum will basically start for 3 days and then will basically complete F. But how come the node basically in a square instead of circle? Well, as not to get confused, remember basically people invented AOA diagram, And then subsequently, a few years later, other people invented AON diagram. So in order not to get confused, the node now is being drawn in a square. So when you look at any network diagram given in this class, the one with the circle and arrow, that is what we call AOA diagram. Whereas the one with basically square, that is what we call AON diagram. As simple as that, okay? So both graphic represent the same activity, two activities, but the graphic is different. So from that, later on, we are going to see it will be how basically our network diagram looks like. This is an example of AOA diagram where the activities name are being written, put it on top of the arrow, and it could be branches out into many things, except that I do not show the real example of AON diagram, AOA diagram yet in the next slide. Okay, let's take a look at this thing. This is AOA diagram, AOA, and the same diagram, when we draw using AON diagram, it looks like this. So AON diagram looks very neat, where activity are being put inside this what we call a node. But node now we are going to draw in a box. But for AOA diagram, it basically using the concept of nodes, and then the arrow, and then closed by the node, etc., branches out. And the most important thing in the network diagram, it should be connected. So this might not be the good diagram to show the whole what we call network, but never mind, we do have in another slide. Okay, this slide, how to read this slide? Okay, I would basically draw 3 lines here. This one indicate the Gantt chart or bar chart, and the middle there here is AOA diagram, and the last one is basically AOA, AON, or even better is PDM diagram. Okay, so now let's take a look at this example. How do you draw in bar chart? Let's say in bar chart, because the x-axis indicate timeline, and then y-axis indicate list of activity. There are two activity, A and B. And it looks like A and B start at the same time, concurrently. But the finish time of A is a bit longer, B a bit shorter, because it maybe require less time to do that. And how do we draw in AOA diagram? Well, again, for activity A, there are two activity A and B. We start with one node and then arrow, close with another node. And then they start at the same time. They can share the starting what we call node or event. And B, you just draw another arrow and then you close with another node. That reflect the same thing. This one and this one is basically exactly the same thing. And for AON diagram, because there are two activities, you can draw one box, A, and then you can draw anywhere, B, and the most important thing, you connect this line accurately, meaning to say, because they are concurrently, they start at the same time, when A start, remember the left side indicate S start, the right side of the box indicate finish. So start and start. You see, there is one concept of relationship. We have not gone into that yet. Never mind. Now, the way we draw in the graphic form, automatically, if you understand the concept, then you know, oh, A and B start at the same time. When you do the calculation manually, then it will basically influence the way you calculate due to the way you basically show or draw how they are connected. Okay, so this is the concept of graphic. Otherwise, people do not understand. Okay, the way you draw will reflect something. Now let's take another example. Okay, so I want you as homework, go through all these slides. Perhaps you have the idea of how example of how to draw bar chart, and then how to draw a network diagram and AON diagram. But never mind, we are going to learn those things. Okay, now let's take a look one more example.
So what
Okay,
is
yes.
SF and FS represent?
Okay, we have not gone into that yet.
Oh,
SS then for start to start, and then SF is basically start to finish. It reflects relationship between each activity. Okay, so that concept, SS, SF, FF, FS, is basically being attached to to PDM diagram, which basically being used in Microsoft Project and Primavera. Because it's a little bit advanced. Uh, it basically does have variation of relationship that you can use, and when you use different relationship, it reflect different things. Okay. All right. Now let's take a look at this diagram. AB, you know that AB start at the same time and also finish at the same time. Then C will basically start after these two events. So how do you draw in terms of AOA diagram? So you start with one node, then for A, okay, for activity A, and then B, B basically you start at the same time, but normally we are going to connect with something else first if it is A and B, because we do not want to, sorry, there are many ways to connect A and B. Later on I will show some of the error, okay. The error is basically simply not to get confused. When the computer use some kind of ID in terms of I, J, K nodes, they distinguish between uh, 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 what we call specific nodes for each activity as not to get confused, okay? And then close by one node there, and then C will basically follow suit. So how do we draw in terms of precedent diagram or AON diagram? We already know that there are three activities, A, B, and C. But now in order to show the correct relationship, we are going to use the arrow that simply indicate, okay, A and B will start according to whatever time. But the most important thing, when A and B completed, then only C can start. Okay, then only C can start. If, for instance, A is running late, then what happened to the start of C? For sure, C had to start late also, because B already finished, okay, fine, but A is still going on. You see, that will basically influence the ending of the C later on. Okay, PERT. PERT, as I mentioned, is a special project being developed for the Apollo project. Maybe you have heard about Apollo. It is not a piece of cake there. Apollo is the rocket to the moon. When US was launching a rocket, they call it Apollo project. Okay. AOA diagram was being first developed, but then subsequently, 1 or 2 years, they wanted to launch a rocket to the moon, and then they are using scheduling, the timing. Okay, they're using the scheduling or timing in order to properly plan whatever things. And because they never launched any rocket to the moon or anywhere else, so this could be considered as the first time. So for any project which basically have the characteristic of being the first time, basically we can perhaps use this kind of thing also. But nowadays, I tell you, a lot of project, even in Malaysia, uh, we might implement the project first time in Malaysia, but not the first time in the world. You just name it. We constructed MRT, not the first time. Other people, other countries have constructed those things. The LRT, you just name it. Any project constructed in Malaysia, it is not the first time in the world. Okay, so there is no need, basically, I would say, to use this kind of concept, but just introduce the brief history. Okay, let's say this is this example of AOA diagram where you start with one node and then you branches out into many activities. Let's say this is activity A, B, this could be activity C, D, E, F, G, and H. But the issue is that normally for A, B, C, D, in normal AOA or AON diagram, you would attach one what we call timing or duration only. But the PERT imply, what if one activity, we really cannot determine the exact timing. The timing could be optimistic, most likely, or pessimistic. There are three timing. For instance, activity A could be completed in 4 days, or 7, or 10. That is the issue. Then how exactly are you going to calculate, okay, the completion of the project? It is very difficult, isn't it? Okay, now they invented this concept, the formula. Let's say 4 plus 7 times 4 plus what we call 10 and divided by 6. So you will not get even number. You will get number with a decimal point. And you know what? If you use this thing at the end of the day, the project could be finishing. I just put some word, some figure here. Let's say 50.32 days. And normally in scheduling, we do not do this. We just are going to take even number for simplicity purposes, okay? Because we only have one duration for each activity, okay? We do not have this concept. All right, that is the concept. And lastly, okay, line of balance. Okay, line of balance. Hello?
Sir, sorry.
Yes. Okay.
Divided by 6 represent what?
That is the formula anyway. That is the formula. Okay.
I
Okay.
thought represent working days or something.
No, no, no. That is
Okay,
the
okay.
formula where you just simply use that formula to come up with that number. Okay, line of balance. Line of balance is the concept used in manufacturing. In manufacturing, you notice that a lot of activity are being repetitive in nature. For instance, kilang kereta ke, kilang buat tupperware ke, kilang buat anything. It's always like that, isn't it? In the factory, they always produce the same thing, the same color, the same shade, maybe for the period of 1 week. Then if they want to change, then only the following week they will change. Okay, now in construction, we do have that kind of similarity. If you notice, our multi-story building is almost the same thing. Every floor is the same. Our housing project, all kind of unit is almost the same. And then the school is also the same. Even building in UTM campus also originally was the same. And then road is also repetitive in nature. Culvert also repetitive in nature. Railway, highway, everything. So if that is the case, then we can use this line of balance concept in order to show something connection between quantity Q versus time relationship. Let's say for piling, how many quantity in terms of that we can drive the pile in 1 day, for instance. If we can, because the pile look the same, everything, the area is also the same, then you can have the linear relationship for piling alone. Then perhaps, maybe this is for stump, okay? A little bit different in terms of slope, doesn't matter. This could be on the what we call beam, etc., because it is repetitive in nature. So if we do have that kind of line of balance, so that kind of line of balance can represent activity with respect to quantity versus time. Why? For easy reference. Let's say either progress, whatever quantity, let's say you want to have a cut off here. So you can cut off, then basically you can read the scale here. So clearing will require how much time? And how much number of clearing whatever things, or in terms of chainage. Normally, if you do this kind of work, you will go in terms of chainage. Chainage number 100, you should achieve clearing how much within how many period of time. But when you do that, please try to avoid these kind of things, interconnecting between pipe laying and backfill. Pipe laying require more time, whereas backfilling require faster time. So if you do that, at the end of the day, the rate might not be what we call pipe laying might not be catching up with the backfilling. So that's why you need to basically do have what we call delay, or we call it buffer. We do not want to have the interconnection because it is illogical anyway. So why do we have these kind of things, this graphic representation? This graphic representation, not to mention that we are going to replace Gantt chart. No, we are going to replace arrow diagram or PDM diagram. No, we are going to stick with line of balance. No, no, no. Line of balance normally being used in highway, railway, whatever project like that. Long time ago, JKR do have this kind of thing being drawn on big piece of paper anyway. This is for easy reference in terms of the quantity of the work and then the timing. You still have your Gantt chart, okay, because Gantt chart do have purposes. This one also do have purposes, and even the network diagram also do have purposes in terms of showing the impact of delay. You see? So I'm just showing you these few scheduling technique for the sake of you understand that out there are many techniques that we are not going to be concerned of, because our syllabus we are going to limit to a few things only. You can explore on your own if you want. That will be sufficient enough. You have basically you might not be able to digest even these few technique anyway. Okay, wait until the evening session. Okay, now that is the end of our two topic for the morning session. Okay.